The final battle of Elbaf is about to begin, and we have some extremely exciting matchups set for several of the Straw Hats, with Zoro, Sanji, Usopp, and Brook all clearly set up with definite opponents in this battle. Between Imu, Somers, Killingham, and the Dami Reversi, Dory and Brogy, every major matchup for our heroes clearly falls into place, with some of these fights having actually been foreshadowed from the beginning of this arc. And the best part is that every fight that is set up has also been carefully built by Oda to be extremely important for each of our main characters and their growth. So listen up as we break down all of these upcoming fights for our heroes from the top. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. But first, this winter, you can become Aokiji with the first ever Devil Fruit inspired hoodie, the Ice Hoodie.
Oh, that's cold.
This is a fully fashioned, multicolored jacquard hoodie engineered at the stitch level. The pattern is literally knitted directly into the fabric, creating a rich, icy texture that won't fade, crack, or wear away over time. And right over the heart, you have the embroidered Devil Fruit detail. The hoodie is 100% cotton, breathable, and built to last. This level of quality for One Piece inspired fashion is something you truly cannot get anywhere else. And this January, the first 30 people to get their Ice hoodie will also get any 2 posters you want for free, including the 2 brand new exclusive Aokiji posters that can only be gotten with the hoodie. All hoodies are made to order and will take some time to ship. So make sure you get your Ice hoodie today, the first and only Devil Fruit inspired hoodie in existence. So before we get into any of our matchups, we actually need to quickly rewind about 700 chapters to briefly talk about a certain arc, Thriller Bark. Because Thriller Bark actually foreshadows a lot of the story of Elbaf. And there are some striking similarities between the matchups that we got in Thriller Bark and what we seem set up to get in Elbaf. So the clear central parallel between Thriller Bark and Elbaf, aside from the obvious ancient giant connection, is that Thriller Bark, similar to Elbaf, was a storyline about battling fears brought to life, with in both arcs the central conflict being the Straw Hats against essentially an army of nightmares. And that's why it's also very interesting that Thriller Bark had a remarkably similar setup of enemies to what we have in Elbaf today. In both arcs, we don't actually have a large cast of enemies like we do with Baroque Works, or CP9, or the Beast Pirates. No, Thriller Bark and Elbaf both have a very tight group of main villains. Thriller Bark and Elbaf both have one main, shadowy, powerful boss figure, who only has a few subordinates in the arc. Moria had Absalom, Hogback, and Perona, and Imu has Somers, Killingham, and Gunko, although Imu has technically possessed Gunko for the moment. But while both arcs have a very tight roster of main villains, the main issue is that the boss of each arc, Gecko, Moria, and Imu respectively, both have powers that allow them to artificially create a terrifyingly gigantic army of subordinates. And that really becomes the main challenge for the heroes in both arcs, with Thriller Bark having Moria's army of zombies, and Elbaf having Imu's army of Dami Reversied soldiers. And one final soft parallel that I'll mention is that it's particularly interesting that Thriller Bark was the storyline that took place right before the huge Marineford War storyline began, and similarly Elbaf seems to be our final storyline before the huge Final War storyline begin. Now, none of this is to say that Elbaf is going to perfectly parallel Thriller Bark in terms of the matchups that our heroes get, but just keep that soft parallel between the 2 arcs in mind as we begin to go down our list of matchups, as there are some striking similarities in terms of how things just neatly fall into place. So to begin with, Zoro's matchup here is very straightforward. Zoro will be fighting both Dami Reversi Dory and Dami Reversi Brogy. That is literally where we leave off, with Zoro charging towards both of them, seemingly planning to take them both on at once. Now, Dami Reversi, Dory, and Brogy are genuinely the perfect opponents that Zoro could hope for at this point in the story. Right now, Zoro is on a collision course with Mihawk, the world's strongest swordsman. And that is a huge gap in strength for Zoro to bridge, considering the strongest opponent that Zoro has beaten up till now is King. So what Zoro really needs at this point in the story to continue bridging that gap between him and Mihawk is an opponent that is at least Admiral level. And in terms of specific abilities that Zoro needs to master, he needs to quickly learn to actually control his Conqueror's Haki, which is an area that he is apparently still lacking in, as Gaban pointed out. Now the problem, of course, is that Admiral level opponents, and specifically swordsmen, don't just grow on trees. But luckily, Dami Reversi, Dory, and Brogy together make for the perfect level of challenge. Now this is a matchup that no one expected, but makes complete sense once you think about it. After all, this certainly would not be the first time that Zoro has had to fight two opponents at once, and Dory and Brogy are two genuinely legendary warriors in the world of One Piece. And between lifting island-sized Sea Kings, or unleashing combined attacks that can destroy island-sized Sea Kings, these two genuinely have some of the greatest raw power in the story. Combine that with the fact that Oda just upped both of their bounties to 1 billion berries each, and it's clear that these two characters are both meant to be at least Yonko Commander level individually, maybe even comparable to Yonko First Mates. After all, even just through narrative framing, it sounds like Dory and Brogy once essentially served as the two wings to Herald, who himself reigned as essentially the strongest character in the ocean for nearly a century. And even if you think that we may be overrating them both a bit here, and that neither of them individually is a fitting challenge for Zoro, well, where they really shine is as a duo. Their strength combined is where their feats become truly impressive, as we saw that they can even take on the Gorosei to some degree, with them actually cutting down Jupiter, and most notably even blocking and then knocking back Warcury himself. So even if we say that individually, sure, Zoro should be able to beat either of them, well, as a duo they should genuinely be a significant challenge for Zoro, with the pair capable of holding their own against Admiral level characters in their own right. And then now what happens when you take that duo and Dami Reversi them, actually powering them up well beyond their usual level? Now you have an almost unfair challenge. This is certainly a fitting step for Zoro to get closer to Mihawk's level. So considering this matchup of Zoro against Dami Reversi, Dory, and Brogy, a lot of things click into place. First, symbolically, Dory and Brogy fit the type of challenge that Zoro has been missing on his path to the top. While opponents like King or Lucci are strong, they aren't exactly honorable opponents and certainly not honorable swordsmen. But with Dory and Brogy, we finally have two genuine, bona fide warriors. Just pure weapons users of legendary stature, who are known throughout the world. These are the type of opponents befitting Zoro's climb to the title of World's Strongest Swordsman. And defeating Dory and Brogy would add a lot more to Zoro's own legend as the World's Strongest Swordsman in general, as Dory and Brogy have significantly more notoriety than anybody else that Zoro has defeated so far. Dory and Brogy are legitimately living legends as the giant warrior pirate captains who terrorized the world for decades. But on top of this, Dami Reversi, Dory, and Brogy will force Zoro to grow as a swordsman. These two legendary warriors, amped by God's powers, should together be too much for Zoro to handle, unless, of course, Zoro is able to master his Conqueror's Haki, which is exactly what Gaban told Zoro that he would have to do earlier this arc. If Zoro is able to finally consciously control his Conqueror's Haki, then even Dory and Brogy's overwhelming strength would no longer matter, as Haki transcends all. And finally, and most interestingly, this matchup is very reminiscent of the matchups that we got in Thriller Bark. Because in Thriller Bark, Zoro also, interestingly, does not fight one of the main villains of the arc. Rather, Zoro's opponent was Ryuma, one of Moria's puppets, the strongest general zombie. Just like here in Elbaf, Dory and Brogy aren't actually villains. Rather, they're simply Imu's strongest puppets, the strongest of his Dami Reversi giants. But the parallels to Thriller Bark become even more clear with Sanji's opponent, Sommers. So to put it simply, Sommers is genuinely the perfect opponent for Sanji, in terms of character, theme, and the manner in which Sanji will be forced to grow. To begin with, the setup is already there, with Sanji hellbent on saving Nami, and last we saw, Sommers is there with Nami and the rest of the Straw Hats who are held captive, putting Sanji and Sommers on a clear trajectory to meet. However, these two are likely fated to meet from the beginning of the arc, as Sommers seems to be Sanji's thematic counterpart. As we know, Sanji is a character who is defined by love, but interestingly so is Sommers, just as a sort of twisted counterpart. Sommers seems to believe that love is pain, and even his ability, thorns plays into this notion, alluding to the idea that every rose has its thorns. There was something rather dark and twisted on Sommer's views on love, and this even seems to extend to Sommer's having a penchant for cruelty towards women, as we saw with his attempt on Shaki. Sommer's is essentially everything Sanji hates, and as such it was Sommer's destiny from the beginning of Elbaf to receive a well-deserved beating from the Warrior of Love. But what's most important about this hypothetical matchup is that it seems practically necessary for Sanji at this point in the story. If Sanji is to be revealed as a Conqueror's Haki user this arc, as has been hinted at, well then he needs a proper opponent to force that ability out of him, much like Zoro experienced with King, and there's absolutely no one better to serve that purpose than the God's Knights. The God's Knights can only be defeated by Conqueror's Haki users, meaning that Sommer's is the opponent tailor-made for Sanji to get this power-up, as Sanji will only be able to defeat Sommer's by unlocking his latent Conqueror's Haki. And taking into account the added scenario of Sanji's female crewmates being held captive, that should likely only add additional fuel to Sanji's fire to help him awaken his Conqueror's Haki against Sommer's. And yet again we see this is highly reminiscent of Thriller Bark, wherein Sanji's opponent was Absalom, a strikingly similar character to Sommer's, a perverse villain who mistreats women. And so just like Thriller Bark, yet again, we are likely to see an angry Sanji charging in, ready to save Nami from Sommer's, just as he did with Absalom. Notably, as I've talked about in past videos, I would not be surprised if Sanji gets some help against Sommer's, at least at first. Very possibly from Robin, actually, at least up until Sanji is able to awaken his Conqueror's Haki, as Robin of course also has a very personal reason to fight against Sommer's. She is probably itching for a rematch, and again thematically we have the contrast of Robin representing flowers and Sommer's representing thorns. But that is not the only team fight that is likely in store for the Straw Hats. Now we get to the supposed man of the hour, Usopp. Readers have been clamoring for Usopp to finally do something this arc, and he most certainly will. Oda has built up for a long time that Elbaf is going to be very important for Usopp, meaning that Usopp needs to do something big this arc. And that means that Usopp is going to be the one to defeat Killingham. And if that sounds crazy, I'm not saying that Usopp is going to pull it off alone, but Usopp will be the main one to make it happen. Why is that? Well, first of all, historically throughout One Piece, whenever it's time for Usopp to have an important storyline, Oda always tries to find something that is extremely high leverage that only Usopp can do. And what do I mean by high leverage? I mean that even if Usopp can't defeat the strongest villain, because he himself is of course weak, the point is that he is able to do something in these storylines that only he can do. A high leverage moment that has a huge impact on the storyline and changes the entire flow of events. For instance, most notably was of course in Dressrosa, where Usopp single-handedly ended Doflamingo's 10-year reign and freed the entire island, as well as all the Colosseum fighters by knocking out Sugar. Taking out this single character canceled out the one devil fruit, the Hobby Fruit, that had been terrorizing all of Dressrosa. This is what earned Usopp 5 stars in Dressrosa, what caused the country of Dressrosa to build a permanent bronze statue of Usopp as their hero, and what caused the entire Grand Fleet to pledge themselves to the Straw Hats because of quote-unquote God Usopp. That is what I mean by high leverage. That is the type of writing that Oda likes to do for Usopp, and in Elbaf, we have a remarkably similar high leverage point villain with Killingham. The majority of the nightmare army that Elbaf is up against right now was created by Killingham. It's because of Killingham that all of Elbaf is falling right now to their fears, and they're struggling to fight back because they're too scared. Whoever can take out Killingham is the one who can undo the entire nightmare that is beflicting Elbaf right now. And that right there is the key leverage point for Usopp in this storyline. And on top of this, there are two very important aspects about Killingham that make it clear that he was tailor-made to be an Usopp matchup. First and foremost is that Killingham's ability seems to set us up with a remarkably similar scenario to Thriller Bark, yet again, paralleling the Usopp and Perona situation. In Thriller Bark, Perona's ability seemed to be extremely unfair, and yet Usopp turned out to be her natural counter, the one person completely unaffected by her ghosts, because Usopp was already negative. With Killingham, it's the same setup, where Usopp's weaknesses can finally shine as his strength to counter an opponent's specific ability. Killingham relies on using people's fears against them, by bringing their fears to life, such that even mighty warriors like Dorian Brogy are struck by fear and unable to properly fight back. But with Usopp, he's scared of everything. All of his fears are already alive and all around him. There is nothing new that Killingham would be able to get out of Usopp. The world as it exists already terrifies him. So just like with Perona, Killingham seems to have been written with a very specific ability in mind that is extremely powerful against anyone else, but not against Usopp. And the second aspect about Killingham's abilities that people seem to be overlooking, but that also makes him a great matchup for Usopp, is that Killingham is actually a long-ranged fighter. He uses a bow and arrow. Killingham is an archer. For Usopp the sniper, Killingham would finally make for a long-range combatant for him to go up against. And Usopp frankly needs that experience if he's going to be going up against Van Augur eventually. But finally, and most importantly, Usopp defeating Killingham would also bring Usopp's character storyline full circle from when he first heard about Elbaf. Usopp's entire character arc has been, of course, about trying to become a brave warrior of the sea. And when Usopp met the giants of Elbaf so many hundreds of chapters ago in Little Garden, those giants became Usopp's vision of what a brave warrior of the sea looks like. And so Usopp strove for so long to reach that land of Elbaf, hoping that when he gets there, he could finally learn the meaning of bravery from the giants of that land. But the beauty of it all would be that now that he's actually reached Elbaf, in an interesting twist, all the supposedly brave warriors of Elbaf are actually the ones who are falling prey to their fears. And it's Usopp who's actually going to have to step up and be brave and defeat their fears for them. It won't be the giants teaching Usopp how to be brave, it will be Usopp ending the terrors that plague the giants, inspiring them to finally be able to stand up and be brave again. That would be the most brilliant payoff to all this build up to Elbaf that Oda has been doing for Usopp all this time. Now note, I definitely don't believe that Usopp can do this by himself. Even if Killingham's Devil Fruit doesn't work on Usopp, Killingham is still a God's Knight. And even if Usopp can beat Killingham in a long-range duel, Usopp shouldn't be able to really damage Killingham. So I do believe that there will be some help from additional Straw Hats or maybe even Gaban along the way. Unless, of course, Oda wants to go down the psychology route with Usopp and have him knock out Killingham using fear, like we've seen Usopp do in past storylines with other opponents. Now that, of course, leaves us with the final villain of the arc, the big bad Emu. And that, of course, will go to the stars of the show, Luffy and Loki, but I don't think they will be alone either. Now, Luffy and Loki will, of course, be coming face-to-face with Emu this arc, and will likely be fighting him as a team. After all, that's what they both planned on doing before everyone started heading upstairs. This battle is obviously crucial for both of their stories. It's time for Luffy to face God, the big bad of the One Piece world, and learn about his existence, especially if Luffy is supposed to defeat Emu in the future. And on Loki's end, well, Emu is essentially his arch-nemesis. Emu is the one that Loki has wanted to destroy for so long, the one that took control over his father and forced Loki to kill his own father. Emu is the reason that Loki set out to sea in the first place. But the catch is, we know that Luffy and Loki cannot actually defeat Emu here. It's simply too early in the story for that to happen. Logically, whenever Emu is set to be defeated, it will be in the final war. And on top of that, Luffy and Loki just shouldn't be strong enough to be able to defeat Emu here. As we saw, even all of these legends together combined couldn't do so in God Valley. And even though Loki is on another level from all of those characters, the problem is that Loki is severely nerfed right now, as he was reduced to a state near death, and it's been established that he's not going to be back at full health for a long time, meaning that Oda essentially made sure that Luffy and Loki are not strong enough to defeat Emu just yet. And so while I'm sure that they'll put up a great fight, the ace in the hole here seems to be an unlikely hero, Brook. See, Brook may not be able to do anything to Emu, but Brook can affect Gunko, and right now Emu is relying on Gunko to be able to be present in Elbaf. This is where the past between Brook and Gunko can come into play, as well as the significance of Brook's music. It's clear that Gunko has been brainwashed in some way to be subservient to Emu, but deep down inside she's still moved by the idea of freedom, and in particular, listening to Brook's music seems to bring out that subconscious desire for freedom from within her. And as we saw just from seeing Brook, Gunko started to have a lot of those past memories come flooding back in and starting to break through that brainwashing That is until, of course, Imu forcibly took over her mind. But what we know is that the true Gunko is still there, buried underneath, fighting to get out from Imu's control. So all we need is a trigger. Brook playing his music live for her. See, Brook's music is no ordinary music. Brook's music literally moves the soul. He is, after all, the Soul King, and we saw that his music is so powerful that it can even mess with Big Mom's soul abilities. I think all along Oda has set up this scenario as the perfect moment for Brook's music to actually deeply impact the plot. If Gunko seeing Brook can actually bring up her true self to the surface, then what about actually hearing a live, soul-stirring performance from Brook himself? That right there could be the trigger to awaken her soul and force Imu out, sending him back to Marijua. That's why Oda set up this whole past storyline between Brook and Gunko, even though we'd never heard about it before. It was all for this scenario at the climax of Elbaf. For Brook, with his music, to be the one to be able to send God back home, when even Luffy and Loki are not able to. And of course, Brook's surprising significance here in Elbaf would be yet another callback to Thriller Bark, which was of course Brook's arc in the first place. So, Zoro versus Dorian Brogy, Sanji versus Sommers, Usopp versus Killingham, and Luffy, Loki, and Brook versus Imu, along with all the other Straw Hats helping out in various fights. These are the matchups we're set to get in Elbaf, and if you have any ideas on which Straw Hats will help out in which fights, then let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to get my extended thoughts on who exactly Frankie, Nami, Jinbei, and Chopper will fight, then you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon. Link in the description below.